Shabbat Shalom. You know, these days, God comes under attack quite a lot, maybe for good reason. Things are going wrong in the world, and we human beings don't want to take responsibility for it. And we wonder what God is doing, if there is a God, allowing all the suffering and crime and murder and kidnapping and beheading and burning that goes on in the world these days. It's a sad reality that we're living, and we seem to be better informed about it than at any time in history. So we have this huge amount of data coming in about all that's going wrong in this life. And it seems that the default position for an educated person these days is to be an agnostic. And perhaps if a person is very wise and very smart and maybe a specialist in the field of philosophy, that they tend to run in the direction of atheism. And these are the hallmarks of our modern society these days. There is a divide, I would say. There's also a reaction against that and in very conservative religious circles. But if you're a liberal religious person, it's difficult to believe in God and speak clearly or think clearly even about the existence of God. And yet I find myself in the position of looking out into the world and thinking to myself, how could there not be a God? And it's this belief in God, this faith in God, I think, that paves the way eventually, hopefully, to direct experience. And I was saying a couple weeks ago, the last time we made a video, was that I think that I had a rather direct encounter with God at a spiritual retreat I was on. I want to make a few more points about that. The first is that while you can think intellectually and speak intellectually about the existence of God, that is not identical with experiencing the being of God directly. I think it is a way in. It's a way of being open to the reality, but it is not the reality itself. I remember when I was in rabbinical school, we would talk about God, and whenever we got on the topic of God, it would get very, very intellectual. And my teachers would say, well, there's the ontological argument for the existence of God, and there's the argument from design, and they would whip out all these philosophical arguments, which were reasonable and rational, but they didn't really touch upon the reality. They didn't really touch the heart of the soul. On this spiritual retreat, we practiced some Jewish spiritual techniques specifically designed to open the heart and to open the spirit to these kinds of experiences. And so I was explaining last time that my experience of the divine was like being picked up by the neck by a tiger. And you can imagine maybe what that's like. It's a situation of helplessness. Could be some measure of security, if you're confident that the tiger is not going to clamp its jaws shut. But you do feel like you're in the grip of a much higher, greater power than you can imagine. And there might be a feeling of insecurity there if you're not willing to surrender to it. So, musing about this, one day I picked up a book by Rumi, the great Persian poet from the late Middle Ages. And one of his lines goes like this. Can you see? The beloved is a lion. We're the lame deer in his paws. Consider what choices we have. Great words. The beloved is a lion. We're the lame deer in his paws. Consider what choices we have. If you surrender to that experience, if you really realize that we are in the hands of God all the time, what choices do we have? It's very difficult in that clarity of belief to want to do anything wrong, to want to harm yourself or anybody else. If you know that you're being watched, if you know there is a higher consciousness that is conscious of every little bit of you, how can you do wrong in this world? How can you do wrong in this world? So, what choices do we have, really? And that's the experience I've been having. Not that I don't make mistakes, I do. If we thought they were mistakes, we wouldn't do them, right? And very often it's only after the fact that we realize that we've erred. But the desire to do good is so very strong when you have this kind of clarity of belief. And underlying that belief, hopefully, is the possibility of direct experience. It's not an intellectual thing. although the intellect can play a role in opening the door. St. Thomas Aquinas, 3 weeks before he died, had this experience of direct communion with God. Now, he was a great philosopher. He's still known for his philosophical writing. And, by the way, he was influenced very, very strongly by the Jewish rabbi-philosopher Maimonides. But St. Thomas had this experience, and he said, compared to this, nothing I've ever written really means anything at all. And he never wrote another word of philosophy and passed away 3 weeks later. So, just some thoughts to keep in mind about the Creator and the real purpose of our lives here on earth. Shabbat Shalom.